Did you ever wish you could change something about yourself? I mean, even people with a good self-image, a healthy self-image, periodically wish there's something they could change about themselves. I mean, we're not all, self-actualized, are we? Well, I think about that myself sometimes. I mean, what kind of attributes would I like to change? Maybe I could just checkbox something, and as soon as I checkbox it, that would be true of me. I know one thing I'd like to be. It'd be a better athlete. I mean, what a life of an athlete, you know? I mean, it's always the grass is greener, I know. I got a associate of mine. My daughter goes to school with his daughter. He's a Major League Baseball player. He got released from a contract a couple of years ago. I think it was because of salary cap. And the team that he was being released from had to pay him over $14 million just to release him from the contract. How'd you like that? Getting paid $14 million for doing nothing. And maybe you already have one of those people. It's called a CEO. Anyway, we have athletes that have that. I wish I could checkbox that for myself. And what other kinds of things? I'd like to be taller. Geez, I'm only 5'9". Couldn't have been any taller. How about having some hair? All kinds of stuff. Being smart. Actually, I guess I'm smart enough. I just have a horrible memory, and I can never seem to remember stuff. Now then, where was I? Oh yeah, wouldn't it be nice if we could just check all of these things? Now I'm all of a sudden this stuff, or even just adding in these attributes. Well, you know what? That's what we actually have with something called the schema within Active Directory. Now, although I can't give you any of these kinds of things, I can give you the ability in something such as a computer account or a user account to add in various attributes that would give you the kind of functionality that you want with those accounts. And what we're going to do is we're going to take those attributes and we're going to build them into a schema object known as a class. So you take a collection of attributes and then put them into a a class. You put them into a class, and then you have something that you can work with. First of all, though, we're going to take a look at how we actually can access the schema in a console. So then how do we actually go about working with the schema? Parts of this are way beyond our scope because managing and editing the schema is a very deep process, and it's pretty close to a programmatic thing. At the least, you probably should know Visual Basic scripting if you're going to do very much of this. But I'll at least show you where you would go and how you would access various parts of the schema. So first thing you'll do is to go to a run line here, or you can go to command prompt, same thing for our purposes, and you'll just type in the MMC there and press enter. And that brings up the console. Now, you may have built your own consoles before. I build my own for my own domain. And I just add in the various snap-ins there that I'm the most likely to need in the future. What you'll do there is to go to File, Add Remove Snap-in, and then click on Add, and you'll see all the different things that you can put in there, some of which already appear on the Start menu. But I can add multiple ones of these into a single console and give myself kind of one-stop shopping without having to dig around through the Start menu for other stuff I want. Now what I'm looking for here is Active Directory Schema. Active Directory Schema. Well, it's not here. Why is that? Well, that's because I have not yet registered the appropriate DLL for this. Now, in Windows 2000, what you had to do was to just install the administrative tools, and then you had to make a registry change that would allow you to make write changes to the schema instead of just read access to the schema. That's no longer true, although some books from Microsoft still say you have to do that. By the way, that's simply because Microsoft writes all their books on Windows Server 2003, almost all of them, strictly from beta product. They don't wait for the final version. That's because they feel they have to get to market faster, and it takes months to write a book. I know, I've written them, and I've managed writers, and it takes a long time to get the stuff done. That's why, by the way, at CBT Nuggets, we don't always have a product available as soon as, like, Windows Server 2003 comes out. We wait until the final version is out so we don't have to go back and apologize for stuff that we did that was wrong. Anyway, what we're going to do here is to register the appropriate DLL. So it's going to be reg svr32, and then it's actually an executable, but you don't have to put in .exe. And then you'll enter in the console that you want to register, actually the DLL that you want to register, which in this case is schmmgmt.dll. Again, I don't need the DLL part of that either. I press enter. It tells me that this was successful in registering that schema management console item. Now I'm done with this command prompt. I can type exit, go back to the console here, type file, or rather click file, click add remove snap, and now when I click on add, I should see Active Directory Schema right there. I'll just double click it, close, okay, and there now is the Active Directory Schema. Now, we're not going to get into all of the hundreds, if not thousands, of various items that are within the Active Directory schema, but we'll just give you a groundwork on what's here. Under the Active Directory schema item here, which, by the way, notice that I'm connected to dcnugget1.nuggetlab.com, we're going to be talking about FSMO roles later on, or Flexible Single Master Operation roles later on. And in this case, for the schema, there's only one domain controller in the entire forest, regardless of the size of your organization. You might have dozens of domains, thousands of domain controllers, you still have only one of them. That's the schema master. And that's what this one is in this case, because it's my only domain controller right now. I've demoted another one. So now I'm left with this one as my schema. If I need to change that to another one for some purpose, then I can change domain controller. And at that point, I can connect to the domain controller that has the read-write copy of the schema. Then I can go down here to classes. And here you might see some things that might look a little bit familiar if you keep on looking. For example, there's the user object. If I double click on that, we see that the user object has certain attributes that you might also recognize. For example, when the account expires, you'll see other things, the employee number you could add in there. We don't have that in there by default, but programmatically or through VB scripting, you could add that into a user object so that when you create a new employee, there's a point there for their new user number as well. How about their home drive, their home directory, their home phone number? So you get kind of the idea here. Here's JPEG photo. Remember early in our series here I mentioned that when you go to a user account and go to its properties, you could even add in a photograph there so that you can see a picture of the user you're looking at, whose account you're looking at when you access the properties. And you can also use that maybe to spit out that JPEG photo on their user ID badge or something like that. Well, that's where it is. Again, this is not exposed to us through the interface right now, but through scripting or through programming, we could make this available. And there's several other different things here which we won't exhaust right now. But anyway, you get the idea there. The user object contains a gazillion of these attributes. Some of them are for users, some of them are for users and computers, some of them are for other specific kinds of objects. For example, if I again go down here and type J, and that takes me all the way down to the J's here, there's JPEG photo. So I could use that, again, in my user account. Why? Because it's an attribute that I can plug into one of my classes, my user class in this case. Let's take a look at another one. I get kind of excited about this. There's another one I think would be really cool if you want to expose it through scripting or through programming. There it is. Car license. That'd be kind of handy. That way you could also put in people's car license number on their user account. And that way if someone's parked in the president's parking space, you can just write down the car license number and make note of who it is that's parked there. And if they're one of your employees, well, they're fired. Might also be useful for certain larger organizations that have high security concerns. For example, American Express is just about a mile south of my building, and they're very careful about who they let into the parking lot and who they don't let into the parking lot. Sometimes they'll even close the gates, and I don't know what all the methods are they use to control all of that, but it looks like it's very controlled. And maybe the car license thing is something that they could possibly use, for example. Now then, this next part. As I record this, I really don't even know if I'm going to include it in the video because it's a huge tangent, and I don't want to use too much time on stuff that doesn't build directly into what you need to know. But, kind of as a free bonus, maybe we'll just go ahead and include it. I don't know. If I don't include it, I guess that'll mean that I'm not talking to anyone right now. So, thanks for listening. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is to right-click and to choose to create a new attribute. Let's say I'm in the Human Resources Department. I'm a programmer for HR. And HR says we want to have an employee social security number in the user attribute, or rather the user object. And we also want to have their salary level included in their user object. And that way we can plug that directly into, from Active Directory, directly into HR application, and we don't have to manually enter it in two places. So what we would do then is to create a couple of attributes, one for salary level, one for social security number, and then we would combine those into a specific class. Now, in addition to classes that we looked at earlier, like user class or computer class, something like that, you can also create something called an auxiliary class. And this prevents me from having to modify the user class, because if I goof that up and make a mistake, then I've goofed up the user class, and that could be huge in terms of the functionality of Active Directory. So what I'll do instead is to add the attributes that I'm about to create into an auxiliary class, which I then just kind of bolt on to the user class. If there's something wrong in what I create in that auxiliary class, whether it's through the class itself or whether it's through one of the attributes that I create, I can just deactivate or make defunct that new auxiliary class, or I can just detach it from the user object. And that way I don't destroy the user object through human error of some kind. So what I'll do to begin with is I'll create the attributes. First thing I want to do is to look at this message saying that it's a permanent creation. That's the same as it was with Windows 2000. Anytime you create something here, don't just experiment with this, because this will be a permanent addition to Active Directory. It will be replicated to all domain controllers. Again, remember, all domain controllers will receive a copy of the schema, but only the schema master has a read-write copy. So I'll just go ahead and click on Continue. Now, another topic here is that it's also something that can be made defunct, so that if I make a mistake here, although I cannot delete it, I can make it defunct so that it's kind of not available to do anything anymore. And at that point, I can reuse the names that it uses, and I can reuse an X500 object ID that it uses, kind of recycle that information to create a new and improved version of this attribute. So for my common name, let's say I want to go ahead and create this, and we'll start with the social security number that we want to use. And for that, for the common name, I'll just go ahead and enter in, social security number. And I'll do the same here. I'll just copy and paste. Do the same for the LDAP display name. And then for the X500 object ID. This is a unique set of numbers that will identify both a manufacturer or a vendor, as well as uniqueness within that manufacturer or vendor. It's kind of like a MAC address is for how it's unique to network cards. Well, this is unique, globally unique, to all of Active Directory and any X500 standard globally. Now, what I could do is I could borrow from Microsoft, and I can use Microsoft's already created object ID that they do allow us to use. That would be 1.2. All the rest of that stuff that you see right there. Now, if you want to use your own object IDs, a couple of things that you can do here. Number one, you can use a Windows 2000 tool. It was a resource kit tool from Windows 2000, and it was called OID Gen. OID Generator is what it is. And that will allow you to create a unique range of object IDs from out of Microsoft's predefined object IDs. They're not for use on the public internet, or they're not for use for commerce, because they need to be unique only within your organization. They could still conflict with something that somebody else has created out there, but at least it gives you a range of IDs. The other thing is you can go to Microsoft website to request a range of IDs for yourself as well. Finally, if you need to, you can go to some standards body such as the International Telecommunications Union, and you can purchase a range of object IDs from them as well. And if you do that through a standards body, then you can use it for commerce and use it to create a product or some kind of a bolt-on to Active Directory if you want. Then we'll just enter in a description like we have down here, and we'll go ahead and enter in syntax for this as well. Now, the syntax that I want to use is going to be just a case-insensitive string, so it'll be just anything I decide to type in there for numbers. And I can enter in a minimum and a maximum value as well if I want to, and that would help to ensure that, for example, I use all 9 characters or all 9 spaces within a standard social security number. And then I'll just click OK. I'm not going to do that, but you can do that if you want. I'll just click OK, and that'll pretty much finish this up. And so it should have created that object. Now let's go ahead and go try to find it. There it is, social security number. By the way, when you create this, if there is another domain controller, but that other domain controller is not available online, its ring partner is not available online in replication, we'll talk more about replication later on, then it will not allow you to create this object because it just takes the extra precaution that it might not have critical information from that other domain controller that it needs to have in order to successfully create this object. But anyway, let me go ahead and double click on this, and now we see that this is all changed into, some of it is into permanent information that I can no longer change. Other things such as the description I can change. Now let's also take a look at these items down here at the bottom, and I'll briefly describe each one of these items. You can allow an attribute to be shown in advanced view. With that deselected, it will not be available in advanced view. And what is advanced view? Well, if I go into something like Active Directory Users and Computers, and I go up here to the top to the menu system and I choose View and Advanced Features, then that's when that item will become apparent. And you'll see that there are some items here that now have become visible that were not visible prior to the fact that I chose that advanced view. Well, that's what that's talking about. So that's what that is. You can also make the attribute active. This is how we're going to make an attribute defunct if we don't want it anymore. We simply clear that checkbox. That'll make the object defunct, and I won't be able to make any changes to it anymore. I don't really want to do that, so I'm going to carefully click No here. And then you can also index the attribute in Active Directory to help speed up searches. If it's something that's going to be commonly looked for, like a social security number, I would go ahead possibly and index the attribute in Active Directory. Not all kinds of attributes allow you to do ambiguous name resolution, but that would allow you to search for things like partial matches, and then you can also replicate something to the global catalog. Be careful about that, because although it's kind of nice to have all the information at your fingertips, the more things you checkbox for this, the larger the global catalog is going to be, and the larger your replication traffic is going to be as well. So you'll just have to carefully consider that kind of an item. Some objects you can also copy when duplicating a user, something unique like a social security number. You're not going to have two people have the same SSN, but if you did have something that you wanted to copy when you right-clicked on a user account and chose to copy it, you could duplicate that item. You can also index the attribute for containerized searches. That means that I can search against just a specific container instead of all of Active Directory. And again, that might be handy if I'm looking for a specific social security number for one employee within a single organizational unit, not throughout my entire organization or throughout the entire domain. Now the next thing I'm going to go ahead and create is the salary level. So I'll right click here again, choose create an attribute again, and then go past the warning message, and this time I'm going to create salary level. After this one, I filled all the information in there, and this one we're going to use for an integer 4, which of course is going to be just a number. And we'll just click OK, and that's pretty much all there is to it. Now at this point, both of those attributes that I created are just sitting there doing pretty much nothing. So they're not really of any use to me yet. What I need to do is to add them to a class. And I can add them to the user class, which I've already got. But if I goof something up and I don't want to mess up the user class on the whole. So instead what I'm going to do, let me shrink this back. Instead what I'm going to do is to create a new class here. It's going to be the Human Resources class. So I'll right click, choose Create Class. I get the same warning message that you can't delete this stuff once you create it. So once I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and enter in all this information. And so I filled all of this in. There can also be a hierarchy for inheritance, and you can associate this with a specific parent. I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is add it into the user as an auxiliary. A little bit later on, you'll see that. And let's make this an auxiliary class. That's what I need to do if I want to be able to just bolt this onto the user class. So I'll just go ahead and do that much. Go ahead and click on Next. And then what I need to do here is to just click on Finish. We'll see a similar dialog box in a moment when I bolt this onto the user class. Now before I do that though, the human resources, if I bolt it onto the user class right now, it still doesn't do anything because there's no attributes associated with the human resources item. So I'm going to double click on that and go to the attributes here. Now I'm going to go ahead and click on Add, and I'm going to add in the items that I did before. What was the first one? Social security number. So I'm going to do social security number there. And there it is, so I'll just click on that and click on Add. Now I've got that one, and then I'll click Add again, and that was salary level, so I'll just type SA to get me to salary level here, add that one in. Now I've got the appropriate attributes for the Human Resources class, and we're ready to bolt it onto the user class. Now one thing I might want to do, and you don't have to do this, but it's probably a good idea if you're doing changes like this, is to update the schema or to refresh the schema. And that's because when I try to bolt this onto the user class, it might not see all of the objects that I've created here. So I'm going to right click here and choose Reload the Schema. Once I've done that, now it's going to be able to go ahead and accept those new items that I've just created. So to do that, I need to go back to my classes and make my way back down to the user item down here. And if I double click on this, then I'm going to be able to go ahead and go to the relationship tab here, and I'm going to add into this class an additional auxiliary class. I'm going to add in the one I just created, which is the Human Resources Auxiliary class. And again, this means that if I've goofed something up into this, all I have to do in order to fix this, the user properties, is to remove it here, and I haven't, goofed up the entire user object that way. So I've gone ahead and done that. Now I'm going to click OK, and now I've got Human Resources and Auxiliary class to the user class. And once again, I'm probably going to refresh the schema, or reload the schema is what I should be saying here. Reload the schema so that I can actually use it within some kind of a script or within Active Directory users and computers if it allows it, or any of those kinds of things. Now that also brings up an important issue, and that is I won't be able to see this quite yet. If I go right now into Active Directory users and computers, I'm not going to have some handy little dialog box next to my user accounts where I'll just go down here to the trainer account. There's not going to be a social security number here, or anywhere else in any of this kind of stuff. There's not going to be a salary level in any of that either. What we want to do is to set it up using a VB script in our case. It's a little bit primitive, but I'm just showing that you can do this. And if you have a third-party vendor, or if you are an application developer, you'll be able to create more elaborate ways of doing this, or fancier ways of doing this. But what we'll do is to right-click, and what we want to see here is a HR item on the right-click menu, which we'll put on there by using a script. Then when we click that item, it'll give us the opportunity to enter in both the salary and SSN. And for that, I'll go ahead and show you three scripts that we'll be using for this. Now for that, I've gone to another directory here, and I've got some VB scripts here. Actually, they're just text files, and that's the common practice that I will do because it's very tempting to just reflexively double-click on stuff. And if I do that, it might trigger this script when I don't really want it to happen quite yet. So just my habit, I just put a text on there at the end until I'm ready to actually run them. Now this item here, this add menu.vbs, is what's going to add the right-click item, and it's also going to create two other scripts, an HRSHELL or HRShell.vbs script, and an HRAdmin VBS script in the Windows system directory. So those are the three scripts I'm talking about, this one, and then the two that it will create in addition. And then there's a couple of other ones here. These are just kind of supplemental, which we will not address for our current purposes. But anyway, this text file here is going to add on the right-click item. So as soon as I change this to a VBS script, and I'm just going to copy it from the current location here, and I'm just going to go ahead and put it on my desktop for easy access. Now what I'm going to do here, didn't mean to double click on it, see the problem there? I didn't want to double click on that if it was VB script, but I double clicked on it by accident as a text file and it didn't hurt anything. I'm going to go ahead and change the extension now, and now I'm ready to go ahead and run this. Now, if we're going to use C script, which is a totally different issue for our purposes, but I could run this from C script so I don't get prompts on the screen. I'm going to just go ahead and double click it here, which would be the same as not using C script from a command line, but by double clicking on it, it's going to add that right click item for us. So I'm just going to go ahead and double click this, and we get some messages that pop up. These are all just innocuous. We'll just go ahead and click OK past all of this kind of stuff until we get to the end. Now what we're going to be able to do is to go back to our Active Directory users and computers, and in reality I may have to close this and open it up again. We'll go ahead and give it a try here. I'll right click in, yeah, I guess I'll have to close this up. So I'll close that up and come back into Active Directory users and computers. Having done that, now I'll go back to one of my user accounts. Now we have this item right here, HRAdmin. Woohoo, it worked. Great action. So we'll go ahead and click on that, and then it just tells me the path that it's using there. That's okay. That's just click OK past that. And it's the object class user. Okay. Now it's going to ask me for the salary item. Now again, this is not as elegant as a real programmer might be able to come up with, but at least it's something. Okay, this is the trainer account. That means me. So let me give myself a really nice raise here. How about $100,000? Okay. Good deal. So we'll click OK here. And then we need a social security number. No, I'm not going to give you my real social security number. I know how you people are. So that'd be 555-55-5555. That's the Hollywood social security number, you know, like the phone numbers. Everything is in all five, right? So anyway, now I've got that information entered in and associated with my trainer account. Now this is kind of good and kind of bad because even though I've entered that information in, and even though it's in Active Directory, if I double click on this, I still won't be able to see that anywhere. And that's kind of good because most users will have, even domain users, will have read access to much of Active Directory, and I don't want someone scavenging all my user accounts to pick out social security numbers or to find out what our salary levels are. But as with the schema, as with many other things, you can assign permissions to various things, and I can give people the ability to search against that. So if I have someone in human resources that wants to find out, you know, the users that are making 50,000 or more, or something like that, then they will still have the ability to be able to do that. And you can use the search function to search for those parameters. Let's go ahead and take a look at how I might do that. I'll right-click on the domain here, choose Find, and I'm going to go to the Advanced item here, and I'm going to choose a specific field, which in this case for my user object is going to be a Social Security number. So I'll click Social Security number, and I want it to be, starts with, or exactly, I'll just do starts with, because I'm too lazy to type any more than that. So it starts with 555, Find Now. Hey, there's a trainer account, starts with 555. And I can do the same thing, of course, with our salary item. All right, now to kind of cap all of this off, let me just point out that this script, as well as these two, I will put up on nuggetlab.com, and I'll zip it together with the schema modifications. Actually, it's a Word document there. I'll put all that in a zip file, and I'll do that because if I make these VBS files and I just put them up there bare, then you may have some kind of firewall settings or some other kind of security settings that don't allow you to download VB script. So anyway, I'll put all that up there on nuggetlab.com for you. The schema modifications is kind of a walkthrough of most of the things that I've done. There's a few other things that it will do as well. For example, I think it's the modify one or the HR info one that will also just populate those fields for you if you want with salary and social security number information. Also, here's a link that I've just kind of pasted into Notepad here so I can access it quickly for you real quick. I use tinyURL, by the way. This is actually going to take us to a Microsoft website, which by itself would be like 90-some characters. But if I go to tinyurl.com, then it allows me to shorten it into something like this. Check it out sometime if you want. Anyway, go to tinyurl.com, and it allows me to shortcut all of this kind of the language here. And this is extremely verbose information on extending the schema, which is this current discussion. That'll give you way more information if you're really serious about doing all that. There's quite a lot of information there, so just another thing FYI. This note was actually pretty simple. We talked about what we want. You can modify things that you want to change in the schema. It's not like life where I was trying to make myself a better athlete and all that kind of stuff. But what you can do is you can take various attributes. And in our case, we took the social security number. What else did we take? The salary level. And we took those two attributes and we put them into an auxiliary class. Once you put them into an auxiliary class, we're able to bolt that on to the user class. And then once that had been done, we could make changes. By using scripts, for example, we were able to make changes so that we could add in a social security number or a salary item into a particular user object. Now, although you don't have to know how to create a social security number, a salary, you don't have to know VB scripting and all that kind of stuff. This whole process here kind of illustrates for you what the schema is and how it operates. Well, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.